Are you looking forward to a new Sony camera with great anticipation? Could we be getting the A9 Mark III, the A7C Mark II, the Alpha 1 Mark II, or even a refresh of the A7S III shortly? Well, a new Sony camera has been registered, which means we can expect a Sony announcement within the next 3 months. Which one of these cameras do you expect we'll get? Details coming up, but first, please do me a favor. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to this channel, choose all notifications, like, comment, and all that good stuff, as it really helps this channel grow. Sony just registered a camera in China on February the 3rd. It's WW198-387. Sony Alpha Rumours didn't say which new camera we would get, and the registration didn't offer any hints. But the website Sony Camera News, as well as Andrea's Sony Alpha Rumours, have mentioned several cameras that we should expect here in 2023. First up, the Sony A7s IV. It might be a bit of a stretch, but Sony Camera News says that we can expect a refresh of the very popular A7s III, a camera that was released back in August of 2020, 5 years after the A7S II. And the time frame for the Sony A7s IV, according to these two websites, well, they're expecting that it's going to happen in late 2023 to 2024. With the release of the Sony FX3, a video-centric version of the A7S III, is there really a need for a refresh of the A7S III? Now, both of these cameras continue to sell well, the FX3 and the A7S III, along with the FX30, which is an APS-C version of the FX3 and the A7S III. Essentially, unless Sony feels the competition nipping at their heels, I'm not really confident that we're going to see the Sony A7s IV this year. After all, we had to wait 5 long years, 5 painful years of anticipation for the Sony A7S III after the A7S II. And that's simply because Sony themselves didn't feel the heat from the competition. In 2023, is there enough competition from cameras like the Canon EOS R5 to warrant a refresh? Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Sony Camera News thinks that 2 years is sufficient for a refresh of the Alpha 1. While we don't yet have Canon's answer to the Alpha 1 in the R1, it is expected soon. Soon in that it could come out in 2023, although recent posts from Canon Rumours indicates that we might not get the camera until, well, just before the Paris Olympics. Back in October 2021, the Nikon Z9 jumped ahead of the Alpha 1. It was announced in late 2021 and started delivering on Christmas Eve. It delivers better video resolutions and frame rates, going as high as 8K 60 frames per second, has Apple ProRes, can shoot up to a staggering 120 frames per second continuous at 11 megapixels, or 20 frames per second lossless RAW, delivering 1.2 gigabytes per second. While it might be a little bit too early for a refresh of the Alpha 1, many Sony customers that would love to see an FX version of the Alpha 1 delivering 8K up to 30 frames per second without the fear of any overheating, to be able to shoot continuously just like the FX3 did for the A7S III, to be able to shoot continuously up to 8K video. Let me know in the comment section down below if you would love to see an FX version of the Sony Alpha 1. According to the Daily Camera News, the Sony A9 Mark III is supposed to be announced in February 2023, and that's where we are here today. And they're predicting it's going to be around the time of CP+, which is just a few weeks away. And even Sony Alpha Rumours has been talking about the Sony A9 Mark III for some time. They were predicting that the Sony A9 Mark III was supposed to be coming out in the fall of 2022, and yet we don't have anything. And the latest rumored specifications for the Sony A9 Mark III? Well, it's supposed to have the 24.2 megapixel sensor, full-frame sensor, licensed from Canon in the R6 Mark II. No, I'm kidding you, it's not going to be doing that, but it is going to have a 24.2 megapixel sensor, and it's going to be backside illuminated and stacked. It's also going to have a brand new image processor. That's right, a brand new Bionz XR image processor. It can shoot blackout free up to 30 frames per second, can shoot electronic as well as mechanical, and it can shoot 14-bit lossless RAW. The dual drive mechanical shutter can go up to 1/400th of a second with flash sync, and using the electronic shutter, it can go up to 1/200th of a second. I suspect we'll have that 9.44 million EVF, but instead of 120 frames per second, it's going to be able to go up to 240 frames per second. And the AI autofocus, well, it's going to have the exact same AI focus found in the Sony A7 IV. Will it have the AI chip? Most likely, the A9 Mark III isn't going to be a cheap camera. And it's going to have the exact same 5-axis stabilization or in-body image stabilization found in other Sony cameras that's capable of 5.5 stops. Now, taking a look at the video specifications, this isn't a video-centric camera, but it does have some pretty decent video for when we need it. 4K, 24, 25, 30, 50, and 60 frames per second. And because it's a 24.2 megapixel sensor, don't expect 8K oversample 4K, but this camera will deliver 6K oversample 4K. It's going to be full sensor readout, so that's really good news. And of course, you get S-Cinetone, HLG, and of course, S-Log2 and S-Log3. And the last rumored specification that we have, it has 10 preset creative looks with 8 customizable parameters. And lastly, the most likely candidate for release within the next 3 months, that's the Sony A7C Mark II. We have Sony Alpha Rumours telling us that a trusted source said it's highly likely that the Sony A7C Mark II is going to be announced in 2023. But the source went on to say that we're expecting the Sony A7C Mark II to have the exact same specs as the Sony A7 IV, a redesigned shell but the same EVF as the Mark I. So there's a potential for a lot of cameras from Sony to be coming out in 2023. A refresh of the Sony Alpha 1, the A9 Mark III, a refresh of the A7C. But what has me most excited or giddy as a schoolboy is, well, an FX version of the Sony Alpha 1. I think the A1 Mark II, it's going to be a useful camera to a few. But if Sony went ahead and released an FX version of the Alpha 1, I think that would sell very, very well. We see how well the FX3 and the FX30 are selling. Can you just imagine now an FX version of the FX3 that can do 8K video up to 30 frames per second, not 24 or 25, but 30 frames per second? I think it would sell very, very well. But what Sony could choose to do is refresh the Alpha 1, come out with an Alpha 1 Mark II, and shortly thereafter, deliver an FX version of that camera. But that's certainly what I would like to see. Let me know in the comment section down below what you want to see from Sony next. Do you think we're due for a refresh of the Sony Alpha 1, the A9 Mark III, the A7C Mark II, or even the Sony A7s III? The A7s III is the one that I'm having trouble with the most because we had to wait 5 years for the A7s III, and it came out in August of 2023, so a 2023 late announcement is certainly possible. The only question is, does Sony believe there's enough competition out there competing against this camera from the Canon R5 and other manufacturers, or maybe even, well, Panasonic is about to refresh the S1 and the S1H. Perhaps we might get a refresh of the Sony A7s III, but I think if we do, it's probably, well, we're probably going to have to wait for early 2024. And if you want to stay up to date on all the latest camera news and rumors, regardless of whether it's these cameras that I've talked about, whether it's Panasonic, Canon, or others, do yourself and me a favor, go ahead and click that subscribe button and choose all notifications. It really does help. It feeds that YouTube algorithm. And also, as soon as I publish a new video like this one here, you get notified, so that way you don't have to go around hunting the latest Twitter feeds, RSS feeds, your favorite YouTube sites, web channels, the whole thing. I cover all the major camera brands and all the major camera news. And I also suggest you follow me on Twitter, because there I cover all the minor news from all the major camera manufacturers and all the major camera brands. And if you want to help support this channel, please use my affiliate links down below for B&H and Amazon.com. I get 1 to 2% back, and it goes to supporting this channel, helping me buy lighting, new camera gear, tripods, and all the likes, and it doesn't cost you anything whatsoever. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to have a very, very busy February. Already there's been a ton of announcements or leaked specifications on the Canon EOS R8. I do expect this weekend we'll probably get some more information. And yeah, we're getting some information on the date and time. So it looks like the announcement might not happen at 10 o'clock. It might happen at 9 o'clock. So I haven't booked my live stream yet because I'm waiting for absolute validation of the time before I go ahead and set that up. Oh, and one other thing, the video that I published, the last video I published, I made a bit of a mistake. Try that again. I made a bit of a mistake on the Nikon lenses. I was looking at F-mount lenses instead of Z-mount, thinking that Sigma had put out an awful lot of lenses, and they hadn't. But still, it's a very interesting story, because there's a story that, unlike Canon, who's completely stopped all third-party lens makers from producing lenses for the RF mount, what the story's talking about is how Nikon has decided to say, yeah, you can produce lenses for the Z mount, and Sigma and Tamron have announced they're going to do so. But the story's all about Nikon saying, yeah, you can't do it for any of our popular focal lengths, such as the 70 to 200, or sorry, 70 to 200, the 20 to 70, or the 70 to 200, or other primes. And that's very interesting. Now, the one interesting thing about this is Sigma and Tamron were able to announce that they're going to be producing lenses for the Z mount. And of course, Nikon's been able to do the same, whereas Canon has received an awful lot of flack. If Canon had come out and said, look, we're going to open up the RF mount to Sigma and Tamron, they would have gotten great fanfare. Then Sigma and Tamron would have come out and said, these are the lenses we're going to be producing. And all behind the scenes in the contracts, we wouldn't have known that there were some limitations, and that would have made a whole lot more sense. So go ahead and watch that video for a bit more detail. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.